In this video we're going to be doing some classic troubleshooting. This 2CV, the last time we drove her, she actually conked out here and wouldn't restart. We had to push her in. We'd had a really busy day. We'd used her for Little Miss Hubnut's school prom. I was so very proud to be asked, and so chuffed that Elly was the chosen steed. We dressed her up with ribbons and stuff. She looked absolutely amazing. In fact, both of them looked absolutely amazing and very in tune with each other. I love the individualism. It wasn't your standard prom garb, I don't think, for either of the females in my life. But Elly the 2CV, unfortunately, we got back to the unit. I left her parked just over there, and she conked out while I was getting the blingo out, which is odd. She doesn't she usually runs perfectly. So just conked out, refuses to start. So we've either got a complete lack of fuel or a complete lack of ignition. So today we're going to be finding out which. But yeah, we need to see why Elly won't start. So this could be very, very short-lived indeed. We'll just have a quick check of the oil, just make sure all's well there. And it is exactly where it should be. Coil connections are on and tight. No other connections look like they've failed. We've got a spare connection here, but that's because that's for the old points. I left the wiring in place should I need to change back at any point. But yeah, everything checks out. There isn't much to the wiring. You've got a 12 volt feed to the coil, and you've got the HT leads, and the 123 unit down there. Is possible 123 unit has failed. It's electronic ignition. They can and do fail. Elly has killed a few in her time, but it's not very common. So before we do anything, I'm just going to see if she'll start now. So I'm going to set the choke, make sure she's in neutral, turn the key, no throttle. Absolutely diddly squat. So we need to ask ourselves, is it the fuel that's the problem, or is it the ignition side of things? So I need to find my spark tester, because that'll be the quickest way to find out. Right, so spark tester between the coil and the HT lead. Let's see if there's any life here. I'm not seeing anything at all there. There we go, we got not one sausage. Very odd. So there's not much that can have failed here. It's the electronic ignition unit, or it's the coil here. Sorry, let's just zoom out. Whee! I'm getting used to my new phone, recording this on my new Samsung Galaxy Ultra S23. So yeah, that seems very dead indeed. So I think we need to see if we're getting anything on these points here. This is the low tension feed. So one is giving it the jump indication like a set of points would. It's activated by magnets, and the other is the 12 volt feed. So one should be constant and one should be occasional. Set that there. Can you see that? Yeah, let's zoom you in a bit. Whee! Still getting used to this, folks. I'm not used to having a zoom. So we get an earth point like there and touch to the black. Do we get anything? Yeah, okay, so the black must be our constant 12 volt feed. But we've got 12 volts there as well. Okay, I'm confusion. Okay, different coil. Let's see what happens. Is the ignition on? No. That is not going to help our cause any. This coil is knackered and leaking oil, but hopefully it's still good enough to try and prove a point. So let's ground that. 12 volts there. 12 volts there as well. Maybe I just don't know how to read a coil. Maybe the best thing to do is just repeat the spark test. There you go. So we'll see if there's any spark this time. It is entirely possible. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Can you believe it? Still nothing. So despite the fact that coil isn't very good, I think it's starting to look more like we've got a problem with the electronic ignition unit. Well, unfortunately, the electronic ignition unit lives behind here. So I think we're going to have to get the fan shroud off, the fan itself, and have a peek. Not that it can really tell us an awful lot, I don't think. Okay, first time going handheld with the new phone. Seems very stable, doesn't it? Just realised I have got a spare 123 ignition unit, because the engine came with one already fitted, and there's one fitted to the old engine. Huge apologies for not getting this engine any sort of state of undress yet. But also there's a good fan that I might have off. Pete Sparrow actually cut a few fan blades off this fan because he considers 2CVs massively overcooled, and obviously every blade saps a little more power, but yeah, others express mild concern, and it's not really for me to say whether Pete's right or wrong. It's certainly true. The vast majority of the time an air-cooled engine is massively overcooling. It's inevitable, because it has to be able to cool itself in the most stringent conditions. So, you know, me and Elly have driven in 40-degree heat, and she hasn't overheated, which means if it's not 40 degrees, she's probably overcooling, and that is a downside of air-cooled engines. It's why they don't exist anymore, because it becomes impossible to regulate the temperature well enough to ensure good emissions. Porsche 911 eventually having to go water-cooled for that reason. But yeah, that would seem the thing to do. We'll swap the 123 units and see if that cures our problem. Well, I've got the bolt out, but that's just a start. Now we've got to try and jiggle the fan off its shaft. Pardon the expression. I'm definitely going to need a tripod. That's the one. Would it surprise you to learn that I waste most of my life looking for implements and tools? Probably not. However, sometime later... Now, this doesn't work quite so well when the engine's not in a car. The jiggle technique usually works really well. I shall need a hammer, because the fan sits on a tapered shaft. We've got to knock it off the shaft. Seems quite happy there. There we go. Fan is out. There's no alternator belt. We removed that last time. You can do that with the fan in situ. Now I need some tiny 8mm to get this rubber sheet out of the way, and the 123 unit sits behind there. So here is our 123 ignition. This is one Colin gave me. Remember Colin 4 years ago? Oh, excuse me, you can't even see me. 4 years ago, almost to the day, in fact. I know I just made it to the Netherlands 4 years ago, but in the run-up to that, we were having to do engine swapsies on Elly the 2CV, and in the middle of that, I also managed to meet Miss Hubnut for the first time. So it was a busy old few days ahead of getting to Croatia. But yeah, Colin, invaluable. So thank you, Colin, for helping me through that tricky time. And he gave me the 123 unit, I think. I have a feeling he did around that time as well. So again, very, very generous. He'd upgraded, because you can now get these with Bluetooth. So you can actually communicate with it, change the maps, see what the engine's doing, because obviously it works as a rev counter, because it's counting the engine revolutions. And there is a bit of me thinking I probably should have done this on the other one first, in case there was an obvious wiring defect. But nonetheless, we're here now. So this replaces the points box. There is no distributor on a 2CV. It fires on both plugs twice in the 4-stroke cycle. So it's a wasted spark ignition, years ahead of modern coil pack designs, which do exactly the same. I'll just get this screw out, do a bit more explaining. But yeah, I hope you're enjoying this. A return to tinkering, folks. Tinkering in a garage, recorded on a mobile phone. So yeah, that's the back of the unit, and there are receivers somewhere that watch these magnets. These are slip-on magnets. If I go onto the posts where you would have had the advanced springs, the weights to adjust the ignition timing as the engine speed changes, and this reads them. And I think I'm right in saying the 123 ignition is Albert's invention over in the Netherlands, and he started with 2CVs, but now does 123 electronic distributors for all manner of cars. So good to see, because I first was fitted one of these to Elly. It must be 20 odd years ago now. There we go. I need to get this little rubber grommet out here. There we go. And get these wires out variously. There we go, and we have to separate them because one of these wires, that one, is the oil pressure switch. So we don't need that one, we just need the other ones. Nonetheless, convincing everything to go through this tiny little hole, taking a little doing. There we go, out. Right, about time I used this 40 litre aqua roll for something. We've never managed to get it sanitised, so we've never used it in Bob. One day we will. Yeah, that's a rare actual breakdown for Ellie. She doesn't let me down very often at all. You know, there's often issues and foibles. I'm having to work around stuff, but for her to cut out and not run at all is very unusual. The first 123 ignition I had that failed, that was a very early one and there were some issues. It lasted a few years, but then when I was working on Classic Car Weekly, I'd gone to visit Vauxhall Heritage in Luton, as it was then. You'll now find the Vauxhall Heritage collection at the British Motor Museum. And yeah, the ignition wasn't failing entirely, but it was having an issue with starting, so it had cut out when you were trying to start the engine. And what Ellie did was fill her exhaust with fuel vapour, and then when the ignition finally did catch, the exhaust exploded. It's the loudest noise I've ever heard, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to get the bomb squad out. And then I had to drive home to Cambridgeshire in a 2CV with pretty much no exhaust at that point. That was very loud. The only other time, oh, actually, maybe she doesn't like going to Vauxhall Heritage, because a few years ago I had a coil fail in traffic. There was really bad traffic on the M1 after I'd been to Vauxhall Heritage, where I filmed the PA Cresta, HC Viva and Mark II Cavalier. I was driving home, we got caught in traffic, and these coils can often cook in traffic. That's exactly what happened. So I had to push her to the side of the road, just past motorway services, and I went and got a cup of tea. And when I came back, she'd calmed down sufficiently for me to carry on my way. So when she does break down in convenient places generally. When I hadn't had her very long, and we were driving along the M6 one day, the throttle return spring snapped just before Corley services on the M6, so I just coasted into the services. So fair play, Ellie. We've had many disagreements over the years, but she has always pretty much got me where I want to go eventually. 8-ball rally was another one. We went all around the UK on the 8-ball rally, did 3,500 miles in a fortnight, and she was running a DG ignition, which was a copy of this 123. Because I'd had the 123 fail, I thought I'll try the DG, and that failed. But that was just causing misfires and general unhappiness. What's going on? Oh, 14 mil, you idiot. Should know this. You have to use a 3/8. You can't get a socket in from a 1/2 inch. And my favoured technique is to wallop the ratchet at this point, which is, it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Depends how tight the fan has been done up before. I'm going to go and get my hammer at this point. And it was on that trip when that DG ignition failed that Graham Wilson down in Cornwall showed me this technique for getting the fan undone. Oh, that's the coil. No, it's not really. Oh no, there we go. There we go. A few sharp shocks with a piece of wood, and you can shock the fan undone. Otherwise, you've got to try and jam a screwdriver into the crankshaft teeth. But nonetheless, the bolt is the easy bit. The difficult bit is getting the fan off. There we go, that's the bolt out with a big shake-proof washer upon it. I'm just going to move that there, and I'm going to try the jiggle technique again. Sorry about that, folks, I just jiggled my microphone off. That's not good. There you go, that's just the bonnet wobbling around, don't worry about that. That is the jiggle technique, but as you can see, Sparrow's removed a few fan blades, but given that one's now got a chunk missing, that one's looking damaged, that one's not looking great. I think we're going to leave that as is. I'm just going to pop you out the holder for a minute, because I just want to show you the oil cooler. Absolutely critical. If you ever get the fan off on your 2CV, just check this isn't clogged up. They can get clogged up with road grime and filth, you know, especially if there's a bit of an oil leak. And effectively this is an oil cooled engine as well as air cooled, so very important. Right, get all this off and we'll swap the wires over and see where we are. I do believe we've finally got there. I've had to redo wiring. I'm going to tidy that up, but we want proof of concept first, and the main proof of concept is turning the ignition on, and then we've got to time it up. That involves turning the light until it comes on and then turning a bit back. We don't seem to have the ignition light coming on there. Oh, hold on, it'll depend where the engine is, won't it? So let's close the container of things before I kick it all over the floor, and we'll get the engine back onto top dead center or something. And the easiest way to do that is just to wind this bolt back in so we can turn the engine over by hand. Sorry, it's been a while folks, you don't have to do these things very often. Of course the ignition light coming on is going to depend on where the engine is in the cycle. But there we go, we've got the light on. Okay, brilliant. I'm going to have to put a timing pin in the engine to know where top dead center is, and then we can give her a go. Let's back you up a bit. This is my timing peg. It's a bent tent peg, and you slot it in down here somewhere. There's a hole on the, oh there it is, on the timing case, crankcase rather. So you should be able to wiggle this in. There we go. Now I have to turn until that slots home. That's the peg rubbing on the flywheel. Oh, there we go. There we go. So that is the peg in. We take the peg out because if you don't, the peg gets wedged in the flywheel when you start the engine and all hell breaks loose. Ask me how I know. To be fair, I think I've only done that once. But to be fair, most people probably only do that once. And now we've got the light on. And I think from what I remember, you turn it until the light goes off. And then you turn it back until it just comes on. Oh, it's not sliding very well. There we go. I'm going to say that's there. And then I'm going to lock that in. And then in theory, Elly should run. Just have a quick sanity check. No wires touching. Everything's connected. Nothing touching in there. Let's just pop that down so it doesn't catch it on the crankshaft. I've got my pin out. Oh yeah, I've got a timing mark there. That timing mark doesn't look entirely in the right place, but nonetheless, we'll just give her a quick start and see if she goes. Okay, that's one cylinder. I've still got my tester on. Maybe my tester is actually broken. So there's like no sparkles getting through on that side. That isn't my usual tester, to be fair. I usually have the smaller ones. That does not feel like it's going on that spark plug. So one problem with a flat engine, access to the spark plugs is always horrible. Okay, I think that's on. Try again. There we go. I've got a bad exhaust leak in here somewhere, I can hear it. Sounds beautiful. There we go. Well, I guess that was a successful session of tinkering then. Elly is actually running up again. I've got to tidy up the wiring. I'm going to check the timing again because the timing isn't aligning particularly well with the timing mark I can see. And then we'll go for a test drive. But yeah, thank you for joining me on this. It's nice to have actually achieved something and got a car fixed that wasn't working. Although, to be fair, we did do an engine change on that Daihatsu Charade. So do watch that if you haven't seen it already. That was also a success. But yeah, marvellous. Right, I'm going to button her up and go for a drive. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you with another video. Farewell. I don't know why I finished there. Look at what a mess the wiring is.